Siva Vaidhyanathan, author of Googleization. Shiva, is Google a monopolist?
It's a monopolist in the sense of one market, and that is web-based advertising. It is essentially a monopolist. It has a remarkable share of that, especially in North America and Western Europe. In terms of the use by people for search, in the United States, it's somewhere between 65 and 75% of the total search is done. In Western Europe, it's closer to 90%, in some places above 90%. That's not really the number that should matter, though. That's an indication of how much we depend on it, but we are not Google's customers. We're Google's product. Google sells us to its customers, its advertisers. The concerns...
Explain that a little more.
Okay, so much like a television network, commercial television network or a commercial radio network relies on our attention and tries to count our attention, monetize it, and sell that for space for advertisers, space or time for advertisers, Google has the same principle at work. It just happens to run its advertising business in a much more efficient and effective way than just about any other media firm ever, which is why it's doing so well. But I think we make a mistake if we think that Google has to answer to us in any more complicated or nuanced or powerful relationship than cattle has to answer to a rancher. You know, because essentially we are what gets sold, not our concerns need not be answered by Google, which is one of the reasons we feel comfortable with Google. We don't...
Well, we feel comfortable because half the time we don't know what's going on. So what you're saying is that Google are selling us as consumers and that advertisers like the idea of knowing more and more about us. It's Eric Schmidt's famous comment about becoming more and more intimate with us, and
precisely, and you know that creeps people out, right? This notion that
understandably,
that this
creeps
one
me
company,
out. Doesn't it creep you out?
It certainly does. But I try to get beyond the creepiness. Creepiness is never really a good starting point for analysis or for policy. What I would like to see is a recognition that relatively few of us have the time, expertise, or interest to do the sorts of tweaks and changes of defaults to limit what Google knows about us. I would like to see a very different situation in which people are invited into services and asked to opt in to an information transaction, instead of having the default that Google, or for that matter Facebook, takes everything and then we're asked to opt out if we happen to know about the problem. Because the fact is, Google is not transparent about this. The very fact that you have to click 2 or 3 times to get a full sense of the nature of the transaction, where Google is tracking so much of what we do and then positioning ads for it. And there's really nothing wrong with that in the abstract. But there are moments in all of our lives in which we would like to discern who knows what under what conditions. And I'm afraid that most of us don't ever get to the point of even having the luxury to think about it.
In Europe, there's an antitrust investigation now going on of Google. There are rumors that there are people in Washington, D.C. thinking of starting the same thing in the U.S. What's your position both on what's going on in Europe and what might happen in the U.S.?
Well, it's fascinating. In Europe, a number of regulators, a number of governments, and the EU are worried about the fact that Google seems to privilege either its own products or certain other products and services over others. Which, of course, is, again, the nature of search, right? Search is about discrimination. Search is about hiding. The question is...
But Google, we're all under the understanding that Google's artificial algorithm doesn't promote its own products, right?
We're under the impression there is some evidence to the contrary within Europe. But the real challenge here, and this is one of the reasons that any such investigation is a huge challenge. Searches aren't repeatable, right? You can record a particular search and particular search result on a day in a place, but a month later, you might get a completely different set of results. And so making a generalization about what Google does is a very difficult thing to do because the algorithm's always changing. Now, it might change one way and change back after a particular legal investigation is over. You never know. What we do know is that there are a number of firms in Europe that have what I see as legitimate concerns and complaints, and the facts have yet to be fully revealed. The big challenge here is, will European regulators be able to get under the hood and understand the principles, the explicit principles that Google is using when making these judgments for us. If it can do that, will it reveal so much information that Google's competitors get an advantage, right? Will it get to the point where it reveals trade secrets? And that's a very touchy area, because we don't, of course, want a company to be afraid to go into this area for fear of having its innovations exposed to the world and to competitors. And we don't want these companies, search engine companies, to be played artificially through search engine optimization tricks, dirty tricks and so forth. So there's a lot at stake with these investigations. I'm excited that people are asking these questions. I'm not confident that ultimately Google will face any major repercussions, and I'm not convinced that it should at this point. I think it's way too early in the process. But I'm happy to see that we're asking hard questions about the role that search engines play in our lives and the power that Google has in our lives.